Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
All right, my friends, I've got some feedback from people who want to see redistricting stopped in Indiana. In fact, we've got some comments from a state senator and giving his reasons for opposing it. I want to talk about those. Again, I know this has been an Indiana-centric couple of weeks here, but this is a nationwide issue. As you know, Texas has redistricted, California has redistricted, was in the process of doing so after passing the referendum. Missouri has, we've got North Carolina, we've got Virginia, Florida, others that are looking, Illinois, others that are looking at doing the same thing. And so, again, this is the prerogative of state legislatures. You will not hear me going to a Capitol building and chanting, cheater, cheater. That's what they do, of course, when I'm at the podium at the State House or Governor Braun or whoever else was speaking that day. But that is not how this, that's, we won't be inconsistent here. We'll be very consistent. Because truth matters. Truth doesn't bend to our whims and desires. This is, as I've said from the beginning, this is 100% the prerogative of our state legislature. There's nothing that prevents them from doing this. But half of the people in this state, and half of the people in this country just won't hear any of that, while being totally cool with what's happened in states like Illinois, of course, California, in the past, saying that Republicans started that's just factually not correct either. This is Republicans fighting back. You know, this is not too different, really, from how Trump kind of came to national prominence here. It's different, but there's a similarity. The left has a way of dealing with Republican presidents, Republican politicians, and normally, that is, if you do something that we don't like, we, the left, we come after you personally, we make your life a living hell and try to intimidate you into changing your positions and so forth. And that's usually what happens. But along came this guy named Donald Trump. I know I've shared this with you many times before, but along came this guy named Donald Trump. And when they did that to him, when they attacked him and came after him, he basically doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down. And the reason we're to this fever pitch is because Trump won't back down, and the Democrat Party playbook, the media's playbook, simply says, hey, every time they respond, we ratchet it up. Well, what happens when both sides have that mentality? And that's where we are today, at least with the Trump side of the Republican Party. There's plenty of Republicans that are dying for an opportunity to surrender, including those that voted against this in the House, including my Representative Peggy Mayfield in the Indiana House, and those who are vowing to vote against it as Republicans in the Senate as well. So, again, I'm not saying you can't have your reasons and rationale, but provide them. So I want to talk about this today. I want to talk about the objection I heard. It leads us into a conversation about federalism, which I love to talk about. These things matter. You know, it turns out the way this country was framed matters a lot. The way that our government was set up, the way our states were, remained autonomous and able to have control over what happens within their borders and so forth. And that all this stuff that the left has been crying that this is a war on democracy. They've been telling people for years, basically, that we live in a pure democracy. And this is a civics lesson for anybody who really wants to learn and pay attention in real time. And that's why I mean, on the one hand, that the stakes are high. So this is not simply for entertainment for me. We have to win this. But in another sense, it's good to have something in the national spotlight or the narrative here that requires people to have to, well, at least gives them the opportunity. I don't know that it requires them to. Requires or give them the opportunity to have, to be able to learn what we really have in this country. And I think that's a good thing. So, coming to you here from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, my pleasure to be here, my friends. Before we get started, let's be honest. When your financial world starts getting a little more complicated, you need more than one size fits all advice. That's where Full Suite Wealth shines the brightest. Their team specializes in working with families and individuals at your level, offering personalized guidance that goes far beyond the basics, from private equity and private credit to options strategies, coordinated legal planning. Full Suite Wealth helps you see the big picture and make confident decisions about your legacy, my friends. It's all about having a dedicated team to guide you each and every step of the way so that you can focus on what really matters: your family, your goals, your future. Want real confidence in your financial life? Well, Full Suite Wealth is here to help you. Check them out online, fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. Okay, now, I've been begging people on the Don't Redistrict side to tell me why. And I've gotten I don't normally get responses. Now, you'll get responses from the unhinged radical leftist or the people who have just bought the narrative of the day coming out of the Democrat Party, the media, hook, line, and sinker. These are folks who believe exactly what they're being told by the talking heads, by the mainstream media, by the professional deceivers in our midst, and they run with it. But we've addressed these objections. Everybody in the state of Indiana or wherever they live has a representative. Just because you don't get your preferred representative doesn't mean that that you seek to have representation. The identity politics of the day, the folks who simply believe in engaging in superficialities and that everything is about race and ethnicity, those folks will say that people are trying to silence certain voices or that they're being racist and so forth. Race is not what this is about. This is about political ideas. I've gone through what this is about. I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. This is about Indiana making sure that her voice is not diluted in Washington, D.C. This is about Indiana sending people to Congress who stand up for our sovereignty, who do not truly bow to Washington, D.C., to a federal government that's gotten too big and too bloated. This is about sending representatives to Washington, D.C. that are not going to participate in lawfare, trying to take down the president of the United States using what I call the Seinfeld-Newman strategy, which is whatever it takes, as long as it takes them, so long as it takes Donald Trump away from the White House, or at least stops his agenda from getting out and being implemented here in this great nation. This is about sending politicians to Washington, D.C. who do not burden Hoosiers with things that come from inflation. Now, you've seen, in fact, I've got it in my stack of stuff, Caroline Leavitt was talking with, I think, Fox and Friends, or it was someone on Fox News yesterday, where she's going after the Democrats who are talking about this affordability crisis we're in as though they're part of the solution. My friends, they caused this. Inflation. Hear me say this. Don't even take my word for it. Go and Google Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman. Go Google Milton Friedman and listen to what the great economist Milton Friedman had to say about inflation. There is one cause, my friends, for inflation. Inflation is caused by the federal government. It's not caused by the state government. It's not caused by corporations. It's not caused by greedy, evil corporations, or it's not caused by trade unions. It's not caused by any person in this country, even if they're people who are radical and deranged. It is caused by our federal government. It is a specific phenomenon where they create more money than the actual value of goods and services that's being produced in our economy. They produce an excess amount of money. That means they've diluted the value of the currency that's out there. That means the dollars you make today are worth less. That means the money that's in your retirement is worth less. That's what happens. Inflation hits everything across the board. Inflation doesn't target one particular industry, say the price of gas or groceries or electronics or whatever. There are other things that can cause prices to increase in a variety of wherever. I mean, for example, if there's an oil embargo or if OPEC decides to reduce production of oil dramatically, that will impact the price of gas at the gas pumps. But that's not, it's lazy to call any increase in cost inflation. I understand words mean things. And we've gotten lazy, and inflation has come to mean anytime something goes up in cost. And I understand in a practical sense that, that you don't care, if something goes up in cost, the prices go up, then that impacts your wallet. And on one hand, you could say it doesn't matter to me why, but I would say on another hand, it absolutely should, because if it is due to policy, you can't get mad at the businesses, you can't get mad at the unions or anybody else. You got to be mad and angry at our federal government. And it's people like the Democrats that are sent to Washington, D.C., who lead us to incredibly high amounts of inflation. You know that in Biden's term, inflation hit a 50-year high. Inflation like we had not seen in half a century. That's because it's all rooted in their desire to spend money. Spend money, more money than we have, massively more money than we have, and the more additional money the government's spending, and that's not being created in the private sector, and it's not being directly taxed from individuals, it's going to be paid for in the form of inflation. That is the only, you either borrow it, you tax it, or you create you get it through inflation. That's the way that it works. Those are the only options that exist to pay for the things, this laundry list of ridiculous things the radical left wants to pay for. Anytime Indiana sends, or whatever state you're from, but I'm speaking specifically to mine because this is where the battle is being waged right now. Wherever this battle, or wherever we send, I should say, a representative to Washington, D.C., who, when they're going through the process of the campaign, a Democrat here will try to position himself or herself as a moderate. Very rarely can you win as an open leftist in a place like Indiana. You might be able to in New York City, but a lot of people in this area are still not prepared to endorse socialism and communism and Karl Marx and all of that. So they pretend to be something that they're not in order to get elected. And then they go to Washington, D.C., and they vote for radicals to lead their party, to form their agenda, and they typically vote in lockstep with the leadership. You combine that, as I've said before, with the illegal immigration problem, which this country had, again, under Biden, under the radical left. This was not an example of just something getting out of control. This was what they wanted. They wanted to overwhelm the system. They wanted to use illegal immigration to impact the way that congressional seats were allocated, because they used illegal immigrants in the count. I went through all of this. So when we send a representative who's a Democrat to Washington, D.C., they don't reflect who's your values. They don't even oftentimes reflect who's your Democrat values. And so I've given you the reasons why I'm against this repeatedly. I've added to them. I'm firmly established in this camp of wanting Indiana to vote for this new map. And I think you should too. And I think you've got one day, basically. This could be voted on tomorrow in the Indiana State House. You've got one last day to reach out to congressmen, or to senators specifically. It's already passed the House of Representatives, the House here in Indiana. But to reach out to senators and let them know kindly, politely, I don't need to tell you this, but no threatening or anything like that. Just let them know that you're in favor of this. You can call, you can email, whatever. But they need to know what is at stake here. And I will say this, I wouldn't say this on the call, but if there are organizations and individuals who are poised to come in and to primary these individuals who are Republicans that do not vote for this. I mean, this is an important thing. They need to know that we find this to be very important. And listen, you might have to even tell them, you know what, I can stomach a lot of my disagreements with you, and I could support you moving forward in the next election if you support this. This is that important. I can overlook some of our other differences here. I can support you if you support this. If you don't, then you have crossed into an area where I think your decisions are contributing to the problems that we have in this nation. And so that's my opposition, or my support, the reason I support these maps. And I've addressed some of the things people have said as to why that they oppose this. But I do want to talk about one of the new reasons I heard yesterday from a senator speaking in the Indiana State House. I don't have the clip. I saw it. I made a mental note of it as I was going through my show prep. I thought, I think I want to talk about this, and that's what I want to talk about. So the reason that this particular state senator is apparently opposed to Indiana passing these new maps is because the idea came from outside of the state of Indiana. And so apparently, if the idea comes from the outside of the state, we have to reject it. If that's the way it works, then I would say, I hope all the radical leftists in this country send us all of their ideas so that I can present them to this senator and say, here are all the bad ideas that Indiana should never accept. And I guess you should be against these because these emails came from places like Illinois, the People's Republic of California, and Washington, D.C. See, for me, the idea is about the merit. Now, let me say this. I believe in federalism. Federalism is this concept that says that there is power that remains with the state. In fact, if you look at the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it basically says that anything not specified in the Constitution, anything that's not delegated, a power that's given through the consent of the governed to the federal government through the Constitution, is reserved to the people and to the states. And so the way it's supposed to work is Congress, the federal government, the executive branch, they're only supposed to be doing things that are explicitly stated, or powers that are explicitly given to them in the U.S. Constitution. And then anything else is supposed to be reserved to the people and to the states. And so what's supposed to happen is that you have 50, what we used to call in school and elsewhere in some conversations, but this isn't common vernacular, but you might have heard it, the laboratories of the states. And so what this does is it says, hey, instead of having a federal government that's forcing its will down the throats of the American people, they're controlling, everything that happens in this country, top-down approach to the economy, top-down approach to education, healthcare, and then states are supposed to do exactly what the federal government tells them. That is not the way that this country was set up. In fact, what's supposed to happen is the federal government is only supposed to do those things that are, granted it through the Constitution, and then the states are doing everything else. And what you have is independent laboratories. You can look and states can say, what worked in Iowa, let's take a portion of that, or let's take all of that and let's apply that in Indiana. Or what happened in Oklahoma, wow, that was a good thing, let's implement that in our state. This is how you can test and measure results and how you can improve. You can see what works. And of course, the idea would be if it is successful in other states, then states would look at that and say, wow, how can we implement that in our state? That's the way that it's supposed to work. But so obviously in that example, there may be things that other states are doing There may be things that people outside of our state recommend that we can then decide for ourselves. So it's preposterous to say that you're against this because of federalism, because federalism is the laboratory of the states, and we should precisely be listening to or learning from what's happening elsewhere so that we can institute best practices in our state. So just because the idea came from somebody in Trump's administration, from Trump himself or from Trump's administration or whoever, that's not the merit upon which we should be judging this. We should be judging it based upon the actual merits, the actual reasons which I gave to you, my reasons in this program today and throughout the course of the last 2 weeks. This is not serious opposition to this particular issue. I will tell you as well, I had a stupid response on Facebook, and this is how you know the other side has nothing to say of value. I'm going to read you this. It's loading. This was posted by a guy named, it's Timothy. I'm not going to give you his full name, even though it is on social media. So, again, his reason, I guess, for supporting this is a response he had to one of my comments. Some people, he says, love pedophile pontiff and all his hatreds, especially the bigotry and racism. Indianapolis doesn't. So, I guess if you support Trump, you support, according to these lunatics here, you're a bigot, you're a racist, you support hate, and you, I guess, support pedophiles. That's the argument here. That's the argument. That's the argument against redistricting, I guess. Who has the hatred, by the way? You don't have to agree with me, Timothy, but I do think you should be an adult, and this clearly does not meet that standard. So, all right, need to square up here to wrap up the first segment. Take a quick time out. Friends, let me remind you that if you're looking to put your branded merchandise, if you need promotional products or signage or anything that is printed with your logo, Red, White, and Brand is here to help you with that. They help put your logo on almost anything, my friends, from, again, apparel to trade show graphics and signage and booths to promotional products, premium products, whatever the case may be. Red, White, and Brand is here to help you. RedWhiteandBrand.com is the website. Promo code Todd will save you 10% on your first purchase. RedWhiteandBrand.com. Promo code Todd. Quick time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Talking here about, of course, redistricting. Talking also about federalism, which I know may sound like a incredibly boring term, but it's important because that's apparently, as I stated at last segment, that's apparently one of the reasons that people oppose, at least one state representative opposes redistricting here in Indiana. And that, of course, makes no sense, as I shared earlier. Did you see, I forget who it was, but there was a state senator. I believe he was a senator. He could have been a representative, but I'm pretty sure it was a state senator who said that he was against redistricting. And I'm going to use a word here that I don't want to say, but I'm just using it in a quote so that you know what I'm talking about. But you may have seen Donald Trump call Tim Walz, again, this is Trump's words, not mine. I'm just telling you what he called him. I'm going to use a word that some will find offensive. I'm just simply telling what it is so you know the reason that this representative is against redistricting. So if you don't want someone to hear it, tune it off in 3, 2, 1. The term is retarded. So Trump called Tim Walz retarded. This made one representative here in Indiana, I think he is a senator. I could be wrong. And he said, look, I have someone in his family has Down syndrome, and for that reason, I'm against redistricting. Now listen, I understand if you don't like what Trump said. I'm not a big fan of that myself. Whatever. That the issue here though, is that you should consider the merits of the argument based upon the merits of the argument. So, I mean, where would this end? Right? Where would we end this? Where would this line of reasoning take us if we took it to the nth degree? I mean, it would lead us to utter madness, to where no one would be endorsing, supporting, opposing ideas based upon the merit of the ideas. It would just be all about who's in favor of it. And you would never talk about the reasons why, which is what I'm interested in. I remember when I was talking about this with a group of friends last week, and I said, listen, I'm more inclined to do almost the opposite of that. I'm inclined, even when someone that I think is wrong on virtually everything, when they come up with a good idea, if I think it's a good idea, I'm gonna work with them to see that get accomplished, that idea be implemented, that piece of legislation be passed or whatever. I wouldn't say because it's a good idea, but I don't like something that you said last week or month or, in another conversation that has nothing to do with this, I'm against the idea. That's lunacy, my friends. That's craziness. Again, these are the reasons that we are given. In fact, I've got another reason here from Veronica on Facebook. This is they talking about the representatives in Indiana, the Senate in particular now, have a chance to do the right thing, which again, what is the right thing, Veronica? Do what you want to do politically. But anyway, she says, and stand as a bulwark against a corrupt and violent political administration in Washington. So her point is the right thing to do is to stand against redistricting because Trump's administration is corrupt and violent. I suppose she means ICE in the streets is what's violent. I don't know what else she would be referring to. I know she's not referring to Benghazi when Obama was in office and when Hillary left those folks to basically fend for themselves because it might impact her campaign. I know she's not talking about the violence of Biden when he abandoned people in Afghanistan, tens of thousands. I think the number was 15,000. And many people died in Afghanistan. In fact, we've had the individual who shot the National Guard in Washington, D.C., was one of the individuals who came from Afghanistan and all that mayhem and just chaos that was there. So what violence are they talking about? ICE? I mean, listen, if you follow the instructions of ICE, if you don't interfere with what they're trying to do, there is no violence. In fact, most of the violence, I can't defend uniformly every ICE agent out there, but it seems to me that the violence comes when they are trying to prevent ICE from doing its job, which is, by the way, in accordance with the law. Why is it not violence to allow criminal illegal aliens to stay in our country? Why is it not violence to allow gang members to stay in our country? People who harm and even kill American citizens. Why is that not violence, Veronica? I don't know what you're talking about, the violent political administration in Washington, but she says it's not easy, granted, that they did sign up to represent the people of Indiana, not Trump and Putin. I mean, this is literally the arguments against this. Not Trump and Putin. You realize that whole Russian collusion delusion has been disproven 100%. It is insane to have ever believed that stupid narrative, as I've said on this program many times, to think that the last step in a conspiracy is an advertising campaign that tricks Hillary voters into voting for Trump. That's what it was. That was the whole argument. And here we are 10 years later, and Veronica still thinks that we shouldn't redistrict because we need Democrats to go and oppose Trump because he's tied to Putin. I mean, this is bonkers, my friends. This is wild stuff. This is the best. And by the way, If you're a person who opposes redistricting, right now, these are the people speaking for you. I have gone everywhere I know. I have gone on social media. I have said it on this program. I mentioned it when I spoke at the Capitol building. I invited those people. Haven't heard from a single one of them, by the way. I invited those people. I invite you, I said, to come onto my program and let's talk about this. Let's reason together. Let's talk about your objections and your rationale here. But I hear nothing. I see people who will like comments that say Indiana doesn't want this, and I say, why? Just tell me why. I've gotten it from zero people. Zero people. And so right now, since you won't tell me, there may be good reasons. I've gone through them. I just shared the one about this is a violation, I guess, of federalism, of states' rights, which is preposterous. We're voting on it now. If it was a violation of states' rights, Trump just would have instituted it and the state legislature wouldn't have voted on it. But that's not the way it works. We still have the rule of law in this country. Indiana did not have to take it up. But for the reasons I've outlined, those are the reasons, some of the reasons, a lot of the reasons why Indiana is doing this and why I support it. Veronica's over here talking about Putin. Putin has zero to do with this. Is preposterous. She continues here. It's no secret that Trump's administration is part of a crime syndicate. The world is she talking about? But even worse is that he is working for Putin. I am not making this. This is literally what it says. This was in response to something at the Indianapolis Star. I'm reading it verbatim. But even worse is that he is working for Putin. Indiana needs to stand firm and not let Red Dawn happen. My good, Red Dawn. I'm a child of the 80s. I watched Red Dawn. Do you know what that is? Red Dawn, for those of you who may not know, is a movie where Russia, the Soviet Union, the communist USSR, invaded with paratroopers and everything else the United States of America. I remember as a kid, we actually played guns. We played guns, toy guns, out in the woods, made our gun noises and everything else. And we would play things like Red Dawn and Tour of Duty. So this is their argument. Putin and Red Dawn. What in the world, Veronica? I asked her, do you work for CNN? Because I'm half tempted to believe she does. Anyway, this is the opposition. I am pleading with those of you who aren't in favor of this to come and at least not let these radical leftist lunatics speak for you, because they're the ones that are speaking for you right now. They're the ones I saw at the State House chanting and all that sort of stuff. This is all I know. I'm asking you to tell me, and nobody has. Friends, if you're curious about Kratom or just trying to figure out who to trust, let me introduce you to Christopher's Organic Botanicals, family-run company. They offer natural, lab-tested Kratom, not the synthetic garbage that's given Kratom a bad name. So Christopher's is about providing natural, tested Kratom that's not synthetic. It doesn't have garbage ingredients and all that. They work directly with farmers in Indonesia and follow the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. There's no gimmicks, no shortcuts, just a clean, honest alternative for people looking for a more natural way to support their health. So you can go to their website, research Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com, and if you decide that it's something that you think is a good thing for you to try, you can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Use coupon code Todd Huff, and you'll save 10% on your first purchase. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things happening in other states that are moving towards redistricting or who have already taken steps or even done the process of redistricting. And we'll get into that here in the final segment of today's program, my friends. Let's face it, there's a lot of companies out there that don't share our Christian values. But the good news is that you don't have to invest in them. At 48 Financial, they specialize in biblically responsible investing. They'll help screen companies out that go against your faith, your values. They'll create a plan that's tailor-made for your goals, and they'll handle all the heavy lifting for you so you can focus on what really matters. If you want to see if your current investments align with your values or what degree that they actually do align, go to 48financial.com/Todd. Again, 48financial.com/Todd. It's quick, it's easy, it's painless. Complete a really quick assessment, and you will see how much, to what degree, your current investments align with your values. 48 Financial, because your values matter, and so does your money, my friends. So let's really quickly here look at some other states of impact here for this redistricting issue. Texas, has already passed. I'm looking here at an article at thehill.com from probably a week ago. But of course, Texas passed a new map back earlier this year. California passed Proposition 50, which was a proposition, a referendum that gave the legislature the ability to draw these maps. Now, a lot of people see that or hear that, and they think, well, Indiana didn't do that. Texas didn't do that. That's because, the rules that states have are set by the states. And so California had a certain process that they followed for drawing maps. They wanted to change that, and so they had to do this. This is how they had to do it. We don't have to do it here in Indiana. I'm not going to repeat what's happening in Indiana. You know it's passed the House. It's gone through the beginning phases, the first reading. There should be some stuff that happens today. This could be voted on in its final form. The final vote could literally be tomorrow, Thursday, or Friday. So in the next couple days, this week, it is likely that this issue is going to be resolved here in the state of Indiana. So this is your last chance. I know you might think, hey, I've not called yet. It's something I have on my to-do list. This takes a couple of minutes. This is the moment where you can make your voice heard, and you can be counted as someone who can call in and tell your senator what it is that you expect them to do with these maps. And if you share my thinking, you want them to pass these maps. Virginia Democrats, again, according to thehill.com, I've seen this elsewhere reported as well, but Virginia Democrats have begun the process of moving forward with their redrawn map. They passed a mid-decade redistricting bill in October that allowed lawmakers to initiate the process. It's funny because I have heard about people who talk about this and they say this is all in response to Indiana. Well, they passed it back in October. How's that in response to Indiana? Indiana didn't call this session until about a month or so ago. So it doesn't seem like that's consistent to me. But regardless, it's their prerogative. I'm going to be remarkably consistent on this. Lawmakers now need to pass it one more time, the Hill reads here, in the state legislature, which they're expected to do easily. So probably won't see conservatives descend on the state house and chant in Richmond ridiculous nonsense that I had to endure here at our state house. But I'm happy to do it, my friends. It was entertaining to me. That will tee up, this article says, a constitutional amendment before voters for a special election, which they're aiming to do in the spring and summer. This new map is expected to create at least 2 additional Democrat-leaning districts. Missouri, we already know, passed a House map earlier. A new map earlier this year should yield potentially one more GOP seat in the state of Missouri. North Carolina, Republicans there advanced a new congressional map in October, which they should be able to turn potentially. Again, none of this stuff is guaranteed. That's the other thing. The more districts you try to squeeze out of your state, the more statistically competitive they're all going to become because you're spreading your party's votes out over more districts. So So North Carolina might be able to get another seat there. In Utah, a judge handed a win to Democrats by choosing a House map for 2026 that gives the party one pickup opportunity, one seat in the House they could pick up. That's it doesn't tell me what seat that is. Florida, a Florida House redistricting panel is set to convene. Well, I think they convened last week for its first meeting as Republicans look to move forward with new maps there. Governor Ron DeSantis said in an interview with the Floridian that he's planning to call a special session likely between March and May. This is going to happen, my friends, potentially in lots of places. Ohio, Maryland, New York. I've got others as well, but I'm out of time, my friends. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day, SDG.